Hi, this video is going to be about my new HO train layout, and I have some of the bench work done here, and I thought I would go over some of the process of planning a layout and just my thought process for figuring out what I'm going to do here. The first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to get as many trains in the room as I could, and in order to do that I decided to go with something called a folded dog bone layout, so I could run my train continuously and also have the option of having a switching area. And some of my interests have been in logging and industrial and gravel, and so I wanted to incorporate some of these elements into my layout as well. So I was on the Model Railroads forum, and I found some good ideas there for doing the layout. And anyway, this is kind of what I came up with right here. And I have a big loop area where I can have my resource extraction, and I have another little loop where I would have the industrial area, and then a switching yard. And so this was kind of my broad outline for how I wanted to do my layout. Now, I decided to first figure out my plywood and then put it on the floor and to be able to visualize how the room is going to look afterwards. So the first thing I did for that was I drew a little plan and figured out the plywood areas and how I would cut the plywood so I could fit the area with plywood and where I would put my track. And so that was the first step. Now I wanted to use up all my materials, not have anything left over. So I came up with 3 sheets of plywood, and I organized them in such a way as to fill my basement, my one half of the basement, and then I laid them out on the floor, and I had to do a little bit of adjustment because of there's a window down here and the heater and such. So anyway, so while I was cutting my plywood, I did a little adjusting and came up with a plan that would fill the basement and also use up all of my materials. Okay, my sidings, I wanted to incorporate into the layout, would be where I would go with my trains in order to pick up raw materials. And I wanted a logging area, so I would have to have an area where I could load my flat cars with logs, and I wanted a gravel area where I could load my railroad cars with gravel, and that would be the hopper cars. So anyway, so I used my biggest area, and I also wanted to have scenery. That's an important item to me, is have a forested area and some rocks and possibly a water body. So I used my largest area here as the extraction area. Some of the constraints I had, of course, were the size of the room, accessing the track, the window that I mentioned before, and the heater that went along that goes around the outside of the room. So once I got everything planned out, and I went to work and I cut my materials, and it actually turned out to be a lot easier than I thought. I just used a handsaw and a jigsaw for all the cutting, and what I have here now that I can show you is the laid out project before I put any of the screws in. So I'm going to go around the room a little bit now, and we'll look at some of the elements that I have put together here. And this is where the forestry logging area and the gravel pit is going to be. And the track is going to loop around this way, and a corner over here, and then it comes around over here, and this is where we have going to have our industrial area right here. And then over here on this end is we'll have a yard for storage of the trains, and also I'm going to try to do a hump so I can unhook the train cars and have them roll into place. Now you can see the plywood is on the bottom, and obviously the plywood will be on the top when this is built. And what I had to use here was 3 sheets of 1/2-inch plywood. I used 10 1x4s, and there's 14 1x4s, and there's 10 2x2s that will be predominantly for the legs, and those are cut right here. And the leftover pieces off the 2x2s I can use as cross pieces for my bench work. And you can see I have everything is pretty much sawed right now, and all I have to do is screw them together. And the most important thing here is getting a square corner on all the cuts. And when I do all my work like this, I have the shop vac present, and just about continually I'm sweeping up, so I have a nice clean work area to work in. So this is the first step in my layout, the planning and the initial construction. And this part only took me about a half a day to get all these boards cut, just using these hand tools. And like I said, I also used a jigsaw. And the next step that I'll be doing is screwing the boards together, putting the plywood on top, and putting the legs down. So even though to me this looks like a big project, it didn't really take that much. And I spent a total of $150 for all the lumber, and I'll probably spend another $10 for hardware, and that is the total cost for essentially for all the bench work here. So I don't think it's that difficult of a process, and I don't think it's that complicated, and I guess you can make it as easy as complicated as you want. But the main idea here is to have fun with your model railroad.